Hey guys, welcome back to We Met at Acme. I'm so excited to be here with co-founder of Betches and You Up podcast, Jordana Abraham. Hey.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Thanks for coming on. I feel like you've been highly requested for many, many years. And I feel like you're like the authority of all dating for Betches. So
Thank you.
it's necessary that we chat.
It's always great to speak with a fellow dating enthusiast in New York City.
Yes. And we've had Jared on the podcast twice now, so I feel like we needed
cool.
you.
Yeah.
We needed you. So speaking of Jared, tell us a little bit about how You Up began. It's a dating podcast. You co-host it with Jared Freed, who's a comedian. How did you guys meet and decide to do a dating podcast?
So good question. Jared and I met probably about 10 years ago. He started off hosting. We used to do this sort of traveling comedy show called like Betches of Comedy. And ironically, he was like the host who had introduced all the female comedians. So we met that way. And then we'd kind of just like always sort of like worked with him in like a dating adjacent way, because he would do like a sort of the male view on dating, and he would do a lot of questions on the Instagram story. And I think we launched You Up. It was our second podcast at Betches in 2017, and he just seemed like a really natural fit. He was like our audience responded really well to him. He seemed to like let them inside the male brain. And I had always been really, really into dating content, and just like figuring out, trying to, untangle all of the different messages that you're given about dating growing up. And for me, especially, like my parents have been divorced many times. So it was always like something that interested me in terms of figuring out like, what did I know growing up is true, and like what should I keep and what should I let go, because that's not particularly serving me in the dating space.
I have so many questions, but I realized that I forgot to ask how old you are and where you're from and what your current relationship status is. So
Sure. So I am 32. I'm originally from Long Island, Roslyn, and I'm married. I just got married in November.
congratulations.
Thank
and
you.
your husband's name is Mike?
Yes.
Okay.
Michael, Mike, whatever. Yeah.
Okay. What does he like to go by?
I think he goes by Mike now. He
Okay.
used to go by Michael, I think, when he was like younger, and now he goes by Mike.
Okay. It's funny how it changes, like back and forth. So my husband's name is Steven, and in public, I call him by his full name.
Okay.
And like, do you call him Mike in public or Michael? Like when you're referring to him, you're like, oh, Michael's over there or Mike's over there.
I think I refer to him as Mike.
Okay.
I think. I mean, it's funny though, because he used to go by Michael a lot more. And I mean, guys, a lot of their friends always called him other last names.
Right.
But his parents call him Michael, which is like a little strange. But
Yeah.
I guess, I don't know. It's fine. It works.
Okay. Love it. So backing up back to starting You Up. So
Sure.
you started it, like 4 years ago now?
Yes.
Okay. And when you first started the podcast, what was your relationship status? Had you met Mike?
We had been dating about 4-ish months, I think, at that point. So it was definitely like relatively new. It was very recently like even made official, I would say. So it was an interesting time to like navigate that situation, but I do feel lucky that I'm married to someone who doesn't really mind me talking about past dating dating and stuff like that has nothing to do with him, or past relationships, or past even like, sexual activity or anything like that. He doesn't really get very like jealous or insecure about that. So that's very nice. I don't feel like I have to censor myself.
Right.
in terms of
Totally.
that, yeah.
So you were never single for You Up.
No, I wasn't.
That's so interesting.
yeah.
Because I feel like Jared has gone in and out a little bit.
Yes, he's our guinea pig. But I have gone through all the different phases, so it's been
Right.
cool
That's
to
true.
do that. Yeah.
That's true. And I'm sure your listeners are like feeling so connected to like when you got married because of that.
Totally. And I also spent, I would say, like the vast majority. I was single from like just after college until I met Mike. I mean, I had a bunch of like small little like 3-monther things, but I hadn't been in a relationship until then. So I felt like I had a lot to say about just dating in New York and the ups and downs and like the struggle of that up until that moment.
Totally. And so how did you and Mike meet?
We were set up. He actually is from a neighboring town on Long Island, from Jargo. But I'd never known him growing up. And then one of my friends from college started dating his friend from high school. And I asked him to set me up and set me up with Mike, and that was basically it. Yeah.
I love that. I love how proactive you were about it. Like, just set me up, you know?
Right. I mean, I think I got into a point where I definitely wouldn't have been. I think when I was younger, I think I would be a little bit more embarrassed or like, you know what I mean? Like it felt kind of vulnerable to say I'm looking to meet someone and I really want to meet someone. But by the time I did it, I was like, I don't care. I'd want to be in a relationship and I'm going to like actively try to find a match.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, you knew what you wanted.
Yeah.
And when is Mike's birthday? When is your birthday? Because we're a little bit into astrology over here.
Oh, cool. His birthday is, I don't know what sign he is. He's July 31st.
Okay, he's a Leo.
Okay. And I am September 7th, so I'm a Virgo.
You're a Virgo. I love that. That's so interesting because Jared is your opposite sign.
Interesting.
What
is he, a Pisces?
He's a Pisces,
okay.
which is really good for co-hosting because you have like opposing opinions sometimes, or maybe not all the time, but a lot of the time.
A lot of the time, yeah, we definitely do. I think that's sort of the beauty of You Up is a lot of it kind of feels like a little bit of like a battle of the sexes in some way, or that's when we started it. That's kind of what we wanted it to be, just the different takes in the same situation between men and women. And I think for dating, that's so true. You have the same situation, and the man and the woman in the situation are often looking at it from completely different perspectives, seeing it from a totally different way.
It's so true. It's like men are from Mars, women
yeah.
are from Venus. But I was curious, like Mike, when you started dating and you had this podcast with Jared, like, did he agree with Jared's opinions or your opinions more? Like, did he feel like Jared was representative of him as well?
I think he thinks of Jared as definitely like able to explain, especially when we go over like fights we have. And I'll tell them to Jared, and Jared really will bring a lot of Mike's perspective, I think, to life. And so I think he appreciates that aspect of him. Although I think he might think that he's maybe like a little further on the spectrum of male behaviors than my husband is.
Right.
So
yeah,
I think he agrees, but maybe his views are a little bit more typical of a guy who's maybe single for longer.
Right. Totally. Did you think, and this is the last question I'll ask about Jared because I feel
so
bad I'm like
no,
berating
that's
him.
totally fine.
Do you think that you saw Jared's breakup coming, or did you think they were going to last?
It's so hard to say, you know, because Jared and I, you know, we have a podcast we host every week and we talk a lot, but I've only really seen them together a number of times, maybe like 3 in person. So I really couldn't say. You really can only like know what I think from a couple. You get a lot more from seeing them interact and seeing them together, and that's not really what. I didn't really have much exposure to that, especially in COVID.
Mm-hmm. So going back to your relationship with Mike, you start dating, you get set up, it's working out. How long into dating did you make things like official, and how did that go? Did he ask you to be his girlfriend? Did you bring it up?
I actually brought it up. We were dating for like about 2 months, and we had been seeing each other like, I don't know, at that point, like three, maybe 4 times a week. So it was like, it kind of felt like it was more real than anything else that I had really experienced before. And I think I just said to him one night, I was like, "Are you seeing anyone else?" And kind of like in a thought. And he was like, "I don't really know, like if I would even have time to see anyone else. Like we're together all the time." And I think through that discussion, it kind of came up like we're not going to see anyone else. And then he was like, to me, like, that's the same thing as being in a relationship, and I'm happy to call you my girlfriend. And that was basically how it came to be. But I definitely did initiate the conversation. I think he was waiting until after my birthday so that he would have less pressure.
I love it. But it sounds like the confidence that you had to initiate that conversation came from the fact that you were spending so much time together that you were like, you kind of knew that the answer was going to be no.
Totally. And I felt good. I felt like pretty confident that it was going that way, but also you never really know. I mean, I'm sure you hear stories of that too, where it's like we've been acting as if we've been dating for months.
Right. Like I've met their mom, but like they're still not.
Right. And then you say something and they're like, whoa. What would possibly give you that idea? It's not like I've told you I loved you and I hang out with you all the time and I've met everyone you know.
The absolute worst.
Yeah.
Did you follow any like rules when it came to the dating stage with Mike? whether it's like, you know, waiting to sleep with him or anything like that, or, you know, waiting for him to say I love you first?
I think that when I was younger, I definitely used to try to follow more rules, and I would read all the dating books and try to be, you know, act a certain way. But I did find, I think by the time I met him, that a lot of that stuff maybe like got you further into dating, but didn't really guarantee that you were going to be able to be with the person. Because once they found out who you, like, it was, a lot of it kind of felt to me like it was putting on, like trying to act in a way that the other person liked or found appealing without, while like sort of holding back parts of yourself. So I think by the time I met him, I had tried a lot of that stuff and it hadn't really worked, and I was trying new stuff, and the new stuff was really just to be more upfront, to be more vulnerable, and that was definitely really hard. But and I'm sure I don't think we slept together till like the fourth date, so I'm sure there was definitely something in the back of my head of like following that rule. Right. But I think generally speaking, I was working in therapy at the same time to try to like be able to communicate better and to vocalize my actual needs, instead of sort of like playing it cool or playing a game or like waiting a certain amount of time to text back. And that's all stuff I definitely used to do and have done. But I think I was doing less when it came to him.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of like a, you know, once you know yourself, it's like take what you need from said set of rules, right, and then like ad lib the rest based off of what works for you.
Totally. And I think the sleeping together thing, I mean, like, I get that question all the time, like, should you sleep with someone on the first date, should you not? And I think that if you're not someone who gets more attached from sex, or it doesn't change the way that you behave with someone, then sure, sleep with someone whenever you want to sleep with them. Right. But knowing myself, that would always make me, if I slept with someone earlier than I think earlier than when I felt like I knew them and trusted them, I felt like that often made me like them more. Right. And so I was more invested, just like in this artificial way. So I did try to wait more for myself than to like make them like me.
Yeah. Or the opposite. Like I've had a situation where I slept with someone early on and it made me less, like it was like bad, you know? Really? And I was like, oh God, now I don't like them. So
it made you like them less.
Yeah. Like it made me over them.
Because it was bad?
Yeah. Okay. So I feel like it could go either way, but like for that reason, I don't know. I probably should have like known them a little more, and then maybe I would have been able to look past the fact that it was bad because I liked them, and then like known to, you know, like to work on it. Okay. So you guys are dating. You're a fish. You've said I love you. How and when did the conversations about your future together come about? Is he your same age, by the way?
He is. Okay. Same age, yeah.
Okay. And so like, did you talk about engagement before it happened, or did you kind of know that was where you were heading?
We definitely talked about it. And I was definitely like very proactive about making sure that we were like on the same page, and that, you know, I've always had a lot of dating anxiety. So that was super important to me to make sure that he was on the same page as me and wanted to get engaged in a certain timeline. Maybe he was probably a little bit behind me, I would say, to be totally honest. But we were close enough in range to where it was fine. Like I could wait a little longer, and maybe he was like a little quicker than he, in his ideal world, if he was the only one in the relationship, would pick. But it was very important to me because I did always have like, I think those are a lot of my dating anxiety was like a fear of rejection or a fear of being left or a fear of being abandoned. And so making sure he had the same goals as me was always something I was sort of like on top of. And it's funny, now that I'm married, I feel like I can like relax more. Or even after getting engaged, I'm kind of like, all right, well, like, I know you're here. I know you're not going anywhere. I have less like deep anxiety about you just randomly leaving.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Everyone's like, does it feel different now that you're married? And like, other than saying husband and wife, not so much, except for the point that you just made, which is that I feel almost like sedated when it comes to dating, because I'm like, I literally do not have to worry about anything. Obviously, like I want to proactively, you know, work at my marriage and keep the spark alive. Yeah. Other than that, like nothing. You know, nothing
Right.
is like, it's like now that that's checked off, I guess I can focus more on like my career and like, you know, other things that are important, but it feels nice to have that like breath and like, you know, release and
Totally agree.
no more worry in that
Just,
department.
Right. It just feels like the game is taken out of it entirely, and you can just sort of like you said, like and you think about it. I think about it in terms of attachment, just like theory and style too, where it's like the babies who feel like so secure, they feel like they can like go out into the world and like do their thing, and because they know that, you know, their mom is like there just like wait, you know what I mean, like waiting to pick them up if they fall down.
Right.
And getting married does kind of feel like that. Like I feel like I could take more risks or
For sure.
or be out in the world doing like more interesting things.
For sure, but also because you're married to someone good, like great for you. Otherwise,
Right.
you wouldn't feel that way. Like, it's like, like you just said, like you now feel like you can take risks. Like I feel like you have to be with the right partner to now then have those like feelings, because like, you know, like they're holding it down or holding you down, whatever it is, you know.
Totally. You get like if they're if you feel like the relationship is secure, you feel secure doing, you know, riskier things outside of it.
Because like surprisingly, there are people who get married and don't have that feeling yet. You know, they still like are nervous when, you know, their husband goes out with the boys, and that's
Right.
It's not good.
Yeah, I mean, that to me, that like defeats the whole purpose, is like then the stability of being in like a long-term relationship is feeling like secure that you can do all that stuff.
Exactly. So you said that you were proactive about, you know, making sure you're on the same page. How'd you do that? Like, what was the dialect?
The dialect was, you know, when do you feel like you'd like to get married? When do you feel like you'd want to, you feel like a couple should move in together? Those were all questions I had asked probably earlier than maybe like one should, or even, but just in the sense of wanting to get on the same page, wanting to know where that person's head was at. And I think my husband was probably a little slower, and also, you know, he had a lot of friends who had moved in with people and it didn't work out, and he was very like intent on making sure that we like lived together first and that was going well before taking the next step, which is, I mean, nice, I guess. Like, it's logical. He's like probably one of the most logical people I know, which can be annoying because it's sort of like the opposite of romance is logic. So he was always making sure that we were like going at a speed that he felt comfortable with, and that he felt like secure in the first step before taking in the next step.
Mm-hmm. I love that you asked, when should a couple move in together instead of like, when should we move in together? I always suggest that to our listeners. Like, if they're like, you know, how do I know when he wants to get married? I always would be, or I would say, like, why don't you ask when he sees himself marrying whoever he marries? You know what I mean? As opposed to being like, when do you see yourself marrying me?
Totally agree.
It's just like less pressure.
It's less pressure. It feels less aggressive. And it's really just like, it also can be seen as, even though obviously it's about your particular situation, it's really about how does this person view dating? How do they, you know what I mean? Like, what are their dating goals? How do they see it playing into their life? I think it tells you a lot about that, in addition to obviously how they feel about you in that other role.
100%. And when you guys were having these conversations, you're Jewish, and your husband is not Jewish, from what I stalked and figured out. Did religion come up in terms of like, you know, how are we going to raise our kids? What's more important? Which one of us is, if either, is going to like cave or not at all?
I had brought up religion actually, probably a month or so into dating, and I asked, you know, if he would be comfortable if we wound up getting married. Would he be okay to raise his kids Jewish, because that was something that was important to me, and I didn't need him to like be Jewish or convert to Judaism. I'm not particularly religious, and I would say he loves Christmas, but that's probably the extent of his religious involvement. And he was like totally fine with it, again, hypothetically at the time. So it wound up being fine, and I'm glad I kind of got that out of the way in that situation. Like, I remember being like, I want to wait long enough where it's not like jarring, but not so long that if his answer is not one that I would like, that I've now invested so much time and energy and I'm really attached to this person.
Yeah, that's smart. I feel like that's the right time. And did you go ring shopping, or did you like send him a picture? Wait, can I see it?
Oh, sure.
It's gorge.
Thank you. So is yours. I can see it from across the table. It's beautiful.
Thank you. So yeah, so what did you do? Did you ring shop?
Yeah, I went with a friend. And I went to go look at rings. Again, like I said, I was always probably like a step ahead of him. So I was very proactive about it. I went to go look, and I gave him, I basically like, I gave him the number of the jeweler, and I said, when you're ready, like, she knows what I want.
So direct.
So yeah, I would say I definitely took it into my own hands.
I love it.
It's an important
it's so important
purchase.
It's such an important purchase. I like that you went ring shopping but not with him, because I feel like, I mean, unless you're in Sweet Home Alabama and like they open Tiffany's, I don't know if you remember that scene, but it's not like this romantic thing. It kind of, for me at least, it felt like it would have taken a little bit of the romance out of it if I was like with him and he was seeing the ring on me before he had picked it out. But I did think it was really necessary for him to know what I wanted. So in the most passive-aggressive way possible, I sent a photo to his best friend of the ring that I wanted.
Oh, wow. But had you discussed engagement before that?
We had discussed it. His best friend actually asked me to send him the photo.
Oh,
so
okay.
It was like not that.
That's a great sign.
Yeah, it was a really good sign.
No one who's not looking to propose asks their best friend to text their girlfriend and be like, ask her about her ring preferences.
Well, that's the one thing though. This best friend was definitely not prompted by Steven at all. He is the kind of person that is married with a kid, and so he's like just wants all of his friends to get there.
Okay.
So he was like, you need to get engaged. Send me, he's also European and really funny. He's like, you need to get engaged. Send me the ring. Like, send me the ring that you want and I'll show him. Little did I know though at that time he had already had a conversation with Steven, and he had said that he was going to propose. So he knew more than I did, but I was just excited to be able to send the ring and make sure it was the right one, you know?
That's great. I love that you had such a short engagement. Looking back, I feel like I definitely would have done that. I was engaged for like a little over a year.
Yeah.
And it's just unnecessary. Like, I feel like you can like to be able to do the decisions like so much quicker and like just have it, you know what I mean? Like sometimes you have too much time.
Right.
And it just drags out a process. And I feel like it would be more fun if it were
totally. But
condensed.
5 months is tough. And your wedding was absolutely beautiful. I'm actually going to a wedding at the venue that you had yours.
Oh, really?
In 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah. Awesome.
Actually 3 weeks. And I'm very excited because of your wedding photos, which I've stalked extensively. I've also been to that hotel before and it's gorgeous.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, hopefully the weather is better for your friend's wedding than for mine.
Oh,
it was definitely.
It didn't look like it was bad.
It was only really bad. The ceremony, it rained a lot. And it was like, it's almost more like the stress of, because especially in the Caribbean, Mexico, you're not really sure if it's going to rain, when it's going to rain, and the weather forecast isn't really that helpful.
Yeah.
So it was really more about the stress of like wondering when and if it was going to rain than the actual rain itself. But
how did you like combat that stress? Were you like, did you have a panic attack? Like, I'm just imagining myself in that situation.
I was definitely very stressed out, but I was kind of just like reminding yourself that no matter what happened, it was like people are on vacation, they're having fun. Everyone around me was really positive, and I'm sure, like, you know, if you have good friends who are like just saying, you know what I mean, they're having a good time. My concern was like, is everyone going to be like miserable, like sitting in the rain? And everyone was just like took it in stride. They're on vacation, they were having like a good time, and they were not particularly concerned. So I think that helped put me at ease. But I was definitely stressed.
Well, that's what's so great about a destination wedding. It's like you're giving them this vacation. So like if for some reason it rains on, you know, one of the hours of their weekend, they're still going to be having a good time. They're still going to be day drinking or whatever people do to have fun on vacation. So
totally.
But like, I'm curious because this would have pissed me off so much. Did anyone text you about the weather that day?
Not that day. I would say leading up, there was like, you know, how are you doing? And I mean, like the night we got there, it was before any of the events started, but there was like this torrential downpour. Like anytime that you like left, you would just, and everything's outside. So it's like you would get drenched. And I was sitting with Mike, and we were just kind of like, what if it's like this all weekend? Like it's going to be like completely miserable. I mean, the whole reason we wanted to do it there was to get married on the beach. So it was very much like a high stress moment, like just thinking it could be like that. Thankfully that was the worst night. But I mean, we would have just done it indoors if it was like very clear, but it was just very unclear if it was going to be raining or not raining. And I don't know, that would definitely added an extra layer to it. But looking back now, it's like kind of cute story. So it's fine.
It's definitely a cute story. And also, isn't it good luck?
I think so. Is that what they say?
I think it's what they say to like make brides okay with it.
Yeah.
But it's still good luck in my eyes. Also, your after party dress was incredible. I mean, all your looks were. We both wore Mira.
Yes.
And we both got our dresses at Mark Ingram. I love yours. I like would have worn that style, but my boobs are just like out of control sometimes. So
thank you. I loved the strapless one too, and I mean that was a concern of mine too with the boobs. And I wound up getting like the Hollywood tape thing, but I was definitely leading up to it. That was another thing that was causing me anxiety. Like, will they stay where they are supposed to? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, it looked like they did. So you mentioned before that before you met Mike, you weren't in like a serious relationship, that you had a series of like 3-monthers. And 3-month relationships are just like a hot topic right now because of Taylor Swift with the All Too Well, which is all about one. And somebody actually asked if we could do a deep dive on why 3-month relationships are so painful and so important. Right. So what was that like for you with the 3-month, stints?
I think, having a lot of dating anxiety, I would probably get over-invested in people that I didn't really even know that well. I mean, look, at hindsight's 20/20. I wouldn't say that probably in the moment. But looking back, I think I was like very invested in the idea of these people being my boyfriend. And I would look at it like I had whatever I had to do to like make sure that they were going to date me was like a big priority for me. When I should have been looking at it like, do I like, do these things that they're doing that cause me this anxiety, shouldn't I be turned off by them? But instead of being turned off, I was like, how do I change my behavior to get them to like me? And I think being in that mindset is probably what made them inevitably leaving so painful. And I also think it probably led them to be I was more likely to be broken up with because I had that stance, because people can sort of like feel that. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like so many people can relate to that feeling of like, what can I do to keep them interested in me, when it's only once we kind of like you're older and like look back and again, hindsight, like, why would I have wanted to be with somebody that made me feel like I had to do something different about myself to be with them? But in the moment, it's so hard and it kind of feels like a challenge. And like as women, we love like a challenge. We love like the fix up situation. Like, oh, he's not into me and like, he's sleeping with a bunch of girls, but like I can fix, like I can change that. I can make him monogamous.
Yes. And I think Taylor Swift, especially like that whole like Red album is like basically encompasses the feelings of all of those 3-monthers, which is why, I mean, I loved it when it came out. And it just, it takes you back to that place of like, this is kind of what it feels like to think of this relationship, which isn't a relationship, is this like deep dramatic thing, because it feels almost more hurtful than a real relationship because you put the person on a pedestal. Yeah.
And you don't really know their like bad side. And she actually, I don't know if this was on Red, I don't think it was, but her song Out of the Woods, which was like about her relationship with Harry Styles, it's all about like, are we out of the woods yet? Are we in the clear? And that's like what we were talking about, when we're married, we're in the clear. Right. But the woods is like when you're, in those first 3 months and you're like, are we there yet? Like, can we stop doing this like dance of like, can we just, it's like the pre-I love you stage of a relationship. But then, as my best friend says, after I love you comes the farts. And then you're kind of good for a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you some of the questions that were submitted by your fans.
Oh, cool.
So one person said, what's a reality of marriage that is better than your expectation?
I mean, I guess what we were just talking about before with the security is definitely one thing. It's also, I would say, better than engagement because you are not dealing with the stress of planning a wedding, which is a huge part of your engaged life. So I felt like, again, like that added to that feeling of like calm and just like relaxation, because you also are not undergoing this huge financial and emotional event that you're planning together.
Right, right. Also, it's so funny. I had this moment the other day. I'm like the spender and my husband's like the saver.
Okay, same.
And I bought a pair of shoes and they were expensive, and I kind of sat him down, or we were sitting down at dinner, and I was like, I just want you to know, like, I bought, and I was really nervous about it. I don't know why. I was like, I bought these shoes, and he was like, how much were they? And I told him, and he was like, okay, like,
Nice.
that's fine.
Do you combine all your finances?
We haven't yet, but
Okay.
like we're heading in that direction. But I felt like when we were like before we were engaged, or maybe just before we were married, he was like so judgmental about like my spending.
Okay.
And now he was just like, okay. And I was like, oh, like that's also extremely calming to me. You know, I don't know what it was about the fact that we were married that made him change his tune about my spending. But I had imagined that like after the marriage, he would get more crazy about like being like, don't spend that, you know?
No, and I think that like that's a great point as to why I actually feel like men are a lot of the times more romantic, right? Because like we're kind of all about getting to that point. And men, once they've decided they want to marry you, or once they've decided they want to like take that step and like make it real, they I think are fully like accepting of whoever you are.
Right.
That they've like already done the analysis. And I think a lot of women are like, I just need to get to that point. I just need to get to that point. And then once they're in that point, they're like, okay, now here's the things that I need to change.
Yeah.
Now that I have you, we're gonna
Right.
like fix you up.
Exactly. It's like radical acceptance from the men. Okay, so you mentioned multiple times how you were anxious when dating. Somebody asked how to become less of an anxious dater.
Well, I would say it's definitely not it's not like there's one thing that you can do. It took me like many years of therapy to sort of figure out. I think it's a lot of it is like your own personal self-esteem is definitely plays into it. And I mean, I used to talk to my therapist about this all the time, where there's like, I think there's like 4 or 5 areas of your life, right? And in an ideal world, you should be like sort of equally concerned with all of them, like work, your health, relationships, friendships. Like, I don't know if I'm even naming them correctly, but essentially like all these different aspects. And like your ideal world is to get all of them sort of like equally weighted. And for me, relationships were always like 70% of it, and everything else was sort of like on the back end. So I think a lot of it was figuring out how to weight those out and how to like I don't know what's the word. I don't know. There was just so much stress for me around dating, and it took a lot of years in therapy to really like figure out how to unlearn some past behaviors and unlearn some thoughts that were drilled into me as a kid to, again, wait out those other things.
Yeah, I think for me with this, what helped me was kind of I not like following rules necessarily, but like having something like a set of rules to fall back on, and not in like the, you know, like army kind of way, but more so like, for example, if I was getting anxiety every time I texted them, just let them text me, you know, because for me, like that helped me know that like they were interested, and like helped me focus on the facts versus like my emotions kind of playing, like coming up with some story of, you know, oh, they're not doing this because they're not doing this. Like if I just let it kind of unfold for me, instead of trying to, you know, interject when I was having anxiety about if they liked me that second, then I felt like I got more security from it. But like, of course, these were past relationships that didn't end up working out. But in those moments, that helped me a little bit with anxiety.
Right. In the moment to moment aspect of like, I'm having like an internally sort of freaking out.
Right.
I think that's super helpful.
Right. It's just so sometimes there is like such thing as a really risky text. And like, I definitely pushed the envelope on that a lot of times, and then was so insanely disappointed when I didn't get the exact perfect response back, that like looking back, I was like, I just shouldn't have sent that text, because if I have so much anxiety about texting this person, like, is this really the person for me?
Right. I also think a lot of dating feels so personal, and like every rejection just feels like it's easy to sort of go from this person's not answering my test, or this person broke up with me after 3 months and doesn't want to pursue a relationship with me, and therefore there's something wrong with me. And that was a thought I would have frequently, when so much of it is about, I think, the match and the way you interact with each other. And just, if you can flip it around and just be like, okay, great, this is someone who's like no longer interested in seeing me. I can now go find someone who can do those things. And what did I take from that? Like, what are the positive things that I liked about this person that I'll look for in the next person? And what didn't I like that I'll look for in the next person too?
Right. Like everything's a lesson almost.
Right.
So when you had these 3-monthers, like, and if nothing ever turned into like, oh, this is my boyfriend, when you would go on dates and someone would be like, so what was your last relationship? Would you refer to like the last person you were seeing? Or would you be like, well, I haven't had like a serious relationship yet?
I think that was a question that I would definitely at some point dread. I mean, I did have relationships like in college, but yeah, nothing too serious, like being in my 20s in New York City. And I think I would say, and I learned, I think I had one of my friends had given me this advice where if someone asked, why are you still single, or what was your last relationship, to just be like, I haven't really met the right match yet, which is true. Yeah. And like, it doesn't, you know what I mean? I think there's like a lot of sense of like, oh, no one's wanted me. I've been on the market for so long. No one's interested in me. But I think if you turn the phrasing around, which is true, like, I haven't met someone that's been the right match for me, it kind of feels more empowering.
Yeah. And it's also true. I always tell listeners to say, I haven't found someone I like enough yet.
There you go. Yeah.
It's like,
then you turn the question around.
Exactly. Yeah. But with Mike, were you just like more outright about it? Like, I haven't had a long relationship for a bit, or did you kind of do the same thing?
I think I had said, like, and this was also true, is that I had been seeing someone for like really on and off who's never like agreeing to date me for like probably about 7 years, like since college. I had met him in college, and it was like very up and down and back and forth. And I always kind of felt like we were like close to dating, and then he would withdraw. And that was a really vulnerable thing for me to tell him about, because I did think that also sort of held me back from really finding a serious relationship, just sort of being hung up on this slightly immature, like push and pull of like games with this guy. And that I remember I was like a little embarrassed. It was a little of a bit of a vulnerable moment for me, but he was like really understanding and got where I was coming from. And that also, I think, led to him sharing his vulnerabilities about his past relationships. So, and I think that's sort of what differentiates a real serious relationship from like a sort of like superficial passing thing, is like your ability to really go deeper and say things that aren't like, show that you're not perfect,
Totally. We actually like got into that on our first date, like our past relationship conversation. When had Mike's last relationship been, when you had gotten together?
I believe it was like 2 years before we met. And he had like a super long past relationship. I think it was like 9 or 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I knew that he could commit.
Right. That's always good. A nice resume.
Exactly.
He stayed at the job for 10 years. So, okay. So do you or Mike speak to the people, the 7-year person on off, or the 9-year person, or is it like?
No. Yeah, we're not. Do you speak to your exes?
No. Okay. Never. What's the point?
Yeah. I mean, if I ran into him like at anything, I would say hello, but I would not be like keeping in touch. I don't really believe in that.
Yeah, there's no point. What were ways that you started conversations on dating apps, or like pickup lines that you use? Pickup lines are not a thing, but I guess just like opening lines.
I think when I started to get more serious about dating, I would probably try to be more specific about like mentioning something in their profile. But I think when I thought I was too cool, it would probably just be like a hey. I was never like that good at the apps, I think, because you actually really have to like try when you're using them.
Yeah.
If you half use them, I don't really feel like they're going to be effective.
Agreed.
Where did you meet your husband?
We kind of knew each other. So he went to high school with one of my best friends from college who was a bridesmaid, and they were close. And so we had met like in 2015, and then we ran into each other at the like 2 months before the pandemic, crazy enough. And I was seeing someone, but like the relationship was kind of ending, and he like hit on me not knowing that I was in a relationship. And fast forward to then when I was single, I like had remembered him from that and reached out to him and was like, I'm single now. Like, if you want to grab a drink.
Wow.
And
That's like the dream.
yeah, it was great.
IRL.
IRL.
You know all about him.
Very rare. But I had like dated seriously people from apps before that.
Right.
Like, I never thought that I would be like an IRLer, you know? I was like so prepared to be like, we met online, you know, to everyone who would ask. And that was fine with me. But I think it was because I accepted that I had an IRL situation, you know?
Right.
I think this is from someone that listens to You Up. They said, believing in the one opinion, you should debate it. I guess that means that you don't believe in the one?
No, I don't. Do you?
Okay. I believe in ones.
Several ones?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think when you replace the word the one with like a match for you, then yeah, I believe in like several like I think there's many people on this planet that like I could probably be in a happy relationship with. That doesn't make, I don't think, take anything away from my relationship with my husband, but I get that question a lot, like, when did you know Mike was the one? When did you know like it was the one? And I'm kind of like, to me that sort of, it creates this like rom-com, like romantic sort of like pressurized fantasy world of like, once you meet the one, everything else, like you don't have to do anything and everything just falls into place and it's magical. And that's not really, like, to me, that's not the reality. The reality is like, I found someone who's a great match for me, who has similar values and like wants the same things that I do, and we get along very well and we love each other. And I think that like, that's great, but like, it doesn't have to, why does it have to be like there's one person in the world for me?
Right. I also think that's so sad for people who lose a spouse to put that thought in their head of like, oh, I'll never find the one because I found the one.
Totally. Or what if they leave you?
Right.
Like, you know
Exactly.
what I mean?
Exactly. So I think to rephrase it, it's like, when did you know Mike was someone that you could really be happy with and make it work with?
Right.
Like,
yeah, and to me, that's a great, healthy question. It says, you know what I mean? It's not as, it doesn't feel as, you don't see that in like pop. It's not as like story, like news headline worthy sounding.
Right.
Are you actually asking that, or is that?
No.
Okay.
Like, I think that's how
Okay.
it should be asked. I think that's how I'm going to ask people that I'm friends with who are dating someone. How do you reset after a fight with Mike?
Oh, wow. I've worked a lot on therapy about that too. And I think that's the other thing. I think people assume once you meet, quote unquote, the one, again, like everything is fine. But all relationships take work, and all, you know, especially in the beginning, I think figuring out like the way that someone's head works is probably the biggest hump that you have to get over, to not take things personally and to just realize like once you actually know someone, things become a lot less personal. So how do I reset? I think I have a tendency to react very quickly, and if I feel something, I blow it up in my head and I overanalyze it. So what I found works well for me is to sort of, it's funny because people are like, don't go to bed angry, but I actually don't really believe that. Sometimes I like to go to bed angry, and then in the morning I can actually think like, is this thing that was really bothering me actually a big deal? And if it is, I now have the space to really get into it in a healthy way where I'm not like attacking the person.
Right.
And if it's not, sometimes I just let it go. If I wake up the next day and I actually don't really care about it, then I cannot mention it. And I also think that's fine.
Yeah. I disagree about the going to bed angry thing, just because for me, that would give me like just annoyance, because for me, most of my fights with Steven are me starting them.
Okay.
Like, I'm the shit stirrer for like no reason. Like, I just like will start a dramatic, unnecessary fight. And then I just end up feeling so bad about it that like, unless on the rare occasion that it was him, then I would for sure go to bed angry, because I'd be like, I'm going to fucking show you.
Right.
But because it's usually me, I'm like, and we do this like hand squeezing thing before bed.
Oh,
and
that's
like,
cute.
if we're really, you know, mad at each other, like neither of us are going to go for the hand squeeze. But like, when I've started up, I will initiate the hand squeeze knowing that I did some dumb shit, you know?
Oh, that's cute. It's like a sign. On
Exactly.
Your end. Okay.
Exactly.
It's like your give.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, there's so many great questions here, but I know we only have a few more minutes, so I'm going to try to pick and choose. Somebody says, so this is someone on, again, a You Up listener, how to stop picking drunk fights with your significant other for no reason. You've talked about this before.
I have. I mean, that's something, again, I've worked very hard to not do. And I think it's funny because like nothing is super linear. So it's not like, oh, I did this one day and now I never do it again. And I think a lot of the things that I've learned, one is to drink less.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that helps. That always helps mitigate those fights. But another thing is what I've really learned, the best way to do that is if I have a problem with someone or if I'm saying he's doing something that's annoying me, I need to say it before we start drinking. Because if I don't say it, then it's just like this thing in the back of my head. And then when I'm drinking, it suddenly gets amplified and it becomes even worse than it actually was.
Right.
And it comes out in a way that is not productive or helpful and just causes like an unnecessary fight. So I always know if I'm never going into a drinking situation with him where I haven't expressed something and resolved it beforehand.
That's very good advice. Okay, this is like such an interview, like actual like job interview question, but where do you see Betches in 10 years?
Oh, wow. Where do I see Betches? I see Betches just, expanding all of our content into all sorts of, products and more podcasts to reach people for all their different interests and, growing on whatever social media platform has emerged 10 years from now that doesn't even exist yet, and just continuing to entertain women at all phases of their life. Maybe, Betches moms of teenagers at that point.
Yeah, or Real Housewives of Betches.
There you go.
Okay, last two. This is again definitely someone who's a big fan of Betches. Because I don't know what this means, but you probably will. Who was head pro from the original blog?
His name is Ian Lang.
Oh.
I think that I'm allowed to say, yeah. And he used to write for us. Not a very interesting story.
I think someone was expecting it to be Jared.
It was not Jared, although they both have a very, I would say, funny, interesting take on like the male dating point of view, but it is not Jared.
Okay, and last one, and then I'm going to hear about your honeymoon, and so does everyone else. Biggest pinch me moment about Betches?
Like, I would say You Up has been like a really great outlet for me creatively. And just, I would say selling out shows for that podcast has been something that's been really exciting. And really just, I guess the idea that it's been 11 years and we're still, I look at my other co-founders, I think you've had Sammy on here too.
Yeah.
And Eileen, it's just kind of like we started this when we were like literally just like joking at like 21 just from our apartment just as a complete joke, and here we are and we have like all these employees, and it's not like a moment, but it's just kind of like looking at each other and being like, we thought this was a joke and here we are.
It's a huge moment. I was in the office the other day, your office, and I was shook by how many people work there, and it's like this really fun seeming group of amazing women. So you should definitely be so proud. And where are you going on your honeymoon?
So I'm going to Sri Lanka, the Maldives, and then like 36 hours in Dubai because we have a layover there on our way back. So we're just going to see it real quick.
That's so much fun. Are you going to like unplug or, pre-record episodes so you don't have to deal with any of that while you're there?
Yeah, we definitely are pre-recording the episodes for the podcast that I'm on. But I feel like I'll still like check in on emails from time to time. And I mean, I'm sure you know this, like one of the perks of like working for yourself and being your own boss is kind of like, it's not like, oh, I have to like answer to, it's more like you want to do it because it's like you care, it's your business. And yeah, I'll like answer an email there. I don't think that would be stressful. I think that would be like, I would feel like I miss, almost like your child, like you're checking out on your child.
Totally. Yeah. I like didn't do social media, but I definitely was still on my email when it was important.
Yeah.
And like, posting pictures from my honeymoon, just not posting like business related things on social. And do you have like a list of books / do you want one?
For my trip,
honeymoon,
I would love books. It's funny. My Kindle just broke, so I'm getting back into the I'm ordering a new one, but it's not coming for a while. So I'm getting back into the actual paper book.
There's something special
thing.
about it.
It's kind
There
of, yeah.
really is, especially when you're
kinda
like on a
nice.
beach, you know, holding a book. It's special.
It feels more real.
It
Yeah,
does.
right.
It really does. So can you leave us with a quote or piece of advice, something that's helped you, or maybe that you've gathered through You Up throughout the years?
Let's think. A quote about, I assume, about dating.
Or like life.
Huh. Sorry, I should have come prepared with this.
No, it's okay. Or maybe like the best piece of advice that you've gathered from recording.
From recording.
We can skip the thinking part when we edit. Don't
Sorry.
worry.
Okay. I think the thing that's changed my life the most, or that I wish I knew more when I was younger, when I was dating, is the idea of dating based on like knowing yourself and your own, setting your own standards. And I think I used to date a lot for other people to, you know, just to get the guy, to get him to do, you know, to commit or to show me that I was worthy. And I think my whole life changed when I looked at it based on like knowing my worth and the idea that I should find someone who fits what I'm looking for, as opposed to trying to change myself to fit into whatever they were looking for.
Yeah, I love that. It's so true. Where can everybody find you, follow you, and listen to You Up?
You can listen to You Up wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find me at Jordana Abraham, and you can follow Betches on all of our Betches Instagrams and podcasts, and check it out. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Thanks for coming on. Awesome. Thank you so much. That was so great.
Of course, that was
oh my
so
God,
fun.
I feel like there's so much that people can take from that. So thank you.
I'm excited to